In the year 2019, I made a video called The Energy of the 21st Century, in which I gave you guys a broader overview of the entire global energy scenario, from basic things like sources of energy to how energy influences global politics. In that video, I was dealing with a broad range of topics, and because of that, I could not provide an in-depth explanation on some of the energy sources that we consider as the future of energy, such as solar energy. You hear about it from the media all the time, how it's gonna change the world, the bold claims that solar is somehow going to solve all of our energy problems and etc. But I wanted to uncover the truth behind all of these claims, and that's why since I uploaded that video back in 2019, I have been closely following the growth of solar energy sector. I read many books, weekly journals, and far too many articles that I even lost count of how many. I have compiled all of my observations in this video, from the problems that are limiting the growth of the solar energy sector to their potential solutions that can make the future of solar energy just as bright as the sun. If you wanna know it all, stick around till the end. Solar energy is by far the cleanest source of energy we humans can ever use. But is it the most efficient one? Will it ever be capable enough to satisfy all of humanity's energy needs? Not today, tomorrow, 10 or 20 years later, but at least by the end of this century. Is it possible? If it is not, what are the reasons, and is there anything we can do to make it possible? Hello, I'm Pratik and you are watching Eclectic, a place where diverse fields of knowledge merge together to give you guys a different perspective to look at the world, from your past to your future, everything at one place. Welcome and get aboard. Electricity is not a dominant energy form. What do I mean by that, and why is this even relevant? When we think about energy, the first thing that comes to our mind is electricity, a natural force that we humans learned to control just a few centuries ago, that powers every goddamn thing, including the device you are using to watch me right now. Because we humans use electricity on a daily basis, we tend to think that the entire world mostly runs on electricity and it is the most widely used form of energy. We think that with the rise of electric vehicles in the next 2 decades, even the transportation would become dependent on electricity. But the reality, backed by authentic facts and figures, tell a very different story. Energy exists in many forms and it constantly changes its form. Chemical energy in battery changes to electrical energy and lights up our homes. A solar cell panel converts sunlight into electrical energy. You and I use mechanical energy while we walk, dance or run. Our body converts chemical energy from nutrients to mechanical energy so that we can move and do things. Similarly, car engines convert chemical energy from gasoline to mechanical energy. Then we have nuclear and radiant energy, etc. Electricity is just another form of energy. Out of all the energy that we humans consume globally, only 27% is electricity. Rest of the energy comes from other forms of energy. Because renewables like solar and wind can only be used for electricity generation, their growth is closely linked to the growth of electricity. Whatever progress we make in the solar sector, that progress is limited to this 27% part. If the growth of electricity use remains limited, so does the growth of solar. If we can't use electricity for something, then we can't use solar for it. Because the growth of solar industry depends so much on electricity use, it has not been able to make any significant impact on the key economic sectors like construction and manufacturing. We still are entirely dependent on burning fossil fuels to produce 4 billion tons of cement, a billion tons of primary iron, and 300 million tons of plastic every year. Then we have long distance transportation, now almost dependent on aviation kerosene for jetliners and bunker fuel, and diesel for transporting goods on cargo ships, oil trucks and freight trains. Electricity is not being used here, and so solar has no role to play. Most of the products you use or eat are transported at least once or usually many times using a machine that runs on diesel. Go out to buy vegetables and ask the vendor how he got those vegetables, and he would tell you that transporting those vegetables to market was made possible by a machine that runs on diesel. Such is our dependence on diesel. Now many of you would ask, why don't we build more electric powered ships and trucks? What are the odds? Okay. A standard intercontinental container ship from Asia to Europe burns 5,000 tons of fuel, which is usually low quality residual oil or diesel. If you want to run that same ship over a same distance on electricity, you would have to load it with 1 lakh tons of today's best commercial lithium ion batteries. 1 lakh tons. That amounts to 40% of the cargo handling capacity of that ship. Never mind the difficulties in charging and operating the ship. The reason behind this is that diesel has 40 times more energy density than most advanced lithium-ion batteries available today. Increasing the energy density of lithium-ion batteries is not easy. In the last 70 years, we have only managed to increase it by threefold. To make an electric-powered ship economically viable, we have to bring at least a tenfold increase in the energy density of lithium-ion batteries. As long as electricity cannot be used for long-distance transportation, solar cannot make any impact here. Remember, I told you, the growth of solar energy sector is limited to the growth of electricity. It cannot be used otherwise. Even if we make more progress and start using electricity and solar for more and more things, do you think it would be 100% clean energy? No, it won't. It cannot be considered as the clean energy because to generate electricity from solar, we have to burn a lot of fossil fuels in the process. Really? Okay. Let's say you want to build a wind turbine capable of generating 5 megawatts of energy, which is enough to power somewhere between 4 to 5,000 homes. For that, you would need to use 900 tons of steel, 150 tons for the reinforced concrete foundations, 250 tons for the rotor hubs and nacelles, and 500 tons for the towers. In total, 900 tons of steel. Remember that. Now, what it takes to manufacture steel? In 2020, total steel production was 1877 million tons. To manufacture that much steel, the global steel industry used 1 billion tons of metallurgical coal. Every ton of steel produced emits on average 1.85 tons of carbon dioxide. Now, if a 5 megawatt wind turbine needs 900 tons of steel, imagine the amount of coal required and the scale of carbon dioxide emission that would happen while manufacturing that much steel. To put all of these calculations into your perspective, consider this scenario. If you want to generate 30% of global electricity using wind turbine by 2030, it would require 450 million tons of steel. And to produce that much steel, you would need fossil fuels equivalent to more than 600 million tons of coal. That was about wind turbines. When it comes to solar panels, manufacturing them also has some serious environmental downsides. Manufacturing solar panels requires caustic chemicals such as sodium hydroxide and hydrofluoric acid, and the process uses water as well as electricity, the production of which emits greenhouse gases. According to a report published in Inverse magazine and science journal Joule, within the next 10 years, the annual carbon dioxide emission from the global photovoltaic industry will exceed the current carbon emission of the international aviation industry. Apart from difficulties in manufacturing solar equipment without burning fossil fuels, there are three major problems that the solar industry needs to solve. Problem number 1. It requires a lot of space. If building a wind turbine of 5 megawatt electricity generation capacity that can power 4 to 5,000 homes requires 900 tons of steel, generating the same amount of electricity using solar panels would require lots of space. To generate 5 megawatt of electricity from a solar plant, you would require 25 acres of land, 1 megawatt per 5 acres. That's a lot of land to provide electricity to just 4 to 5,000 homes. Solar and wind energy sources can take up to 50 to 60 times more space than fossil fuels. It would take 45 square miles of photovoltaic panels, roughly 28,000 acres, to be able to produce the same amount of electricity as that of a single multi-reactor nuclear power plant. Now you do the rest of the calculations yourself. Problem number 2. The need for better and more efficient batteries. It would be a lot easier to expand our use of solar and wind energy if we had better ways to store the large quantities of electricity. There are not enough batteries to store solar energy for our cloudy days when we don't get enough sunlight. Lithium-ion batteries are today's workhorses in both stationary and mobile applications. Despite having much higher energy density than our old lead-acid batteries, lithium-ion batteries are still inadequate to meet large-scale long-term storage needs. The world's largest storage system, located in Southern California, that comprises more than 18,000 lithium-ion batteries, is capable of running at 100 megawatts for 4 hours. If you compare this capacity to the daily electricity consumption of any large Asian city, you would understand that it's not sufficient. Mumbai, a city from India, consumes 3,000 megawatts of electricity every day. Now you guys would ask, if we need more batteries, why aren't we manufacturing more batteries? The problem here is money. Manufacturing batteries is very expensive and battery life is very limited. So basically the cost of storage is too high. How high? Let me put that into your perspective. Hypothetically, if you want to meet 80% of America's electricity demand with solar and wind, then it would require a battery storage system which would cost more than $2.5 trillion. Whoa! That amount is equivalent to the entire GDP of India and significantly more than the GDP of a country like Brazil. Problem number 3. Growing dependence on China. This is gonna be interesting. This is more like a geopolitical or a political issue. Ramping up the growth of solar sector would mean increasing dependence on China. You require more steel to build wind turbines. Guess who produces more than 50% of the global steel? You want more solar cells? Guess who manufactures them the most? China. China. China has a tight hold over all the 3 raw materials that are needed to manufacture solar cells: polysilicon, ingots and wafers. It controls 64% of polysilicon material worldwide and remains the largest solar cell supplier worldwide, comprising 41% of global exports. A country like India, which plans to significantly increase its solar energy capacity, still imports more than 70% of solar equipment from China. I did not make this video just to list out the problems that are stopping solar energy from achieving its full potential. My goal was to make people aware of these problems and initiate a healthy discussion to find possible solutions. To point you guys towards the right direction, here are some of the possible solutions to the problems we discussed so far. As far as long distance transportation is concerned, using electric powered ships to move goods across the globe is not going to be feasible for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, to make it possible, we would have to significantly increase the energy density of lithium-ion batteries. Remember, I told you that diesel has 40 times more energy density than lithium-ion batteries. To make long-distance transportation using electric-powered ships economically viable, we would need to increase the energy density of batteries by at least 10-fold. But that would take a lot of years, if not decades. Until then, diesel engines are here to stay. There are no readily available mass more alternatives that could keep transporting goods affordably and efficiently around the globe to keep the global economy afloat. I already showed you that you need an enormous amount of steel for building wind turbines, and the majority of steel is manufactured using fossil fuels. To solve that, we need to decarbonize the manufacturing industry that manufactures the material needed for installing wind turbines and other solar equipment. Most importantly, the steel industry. All steel is made of iron and carbon. Making steel is basically a process of refining iron. There are 2 ways to produce steel: basic oxygen furnace steel making and electric arc furnace steel making. A basic oxygen furnace is a vessel used to convert hot molten iron and steel scrap into steel by blowing oxygen into the furnace. It uses coal as fuel and emits enormous amounts of carbon dioxide at various steps in the process. Nonetheless, this is the most dominant steel making method as of now. More than 50% of the global steel output is produced using basic oxygen furnace methods. The second one is the electric arc furnace, which involves tossing up scrap steel into a furnace and then placing electrodes that carry electric current into the furnace to heat and melt the scrap steel. Additional metals and oxygen are added to material and are eventually removed from the furnace once the process is completed. This process is environmentally friendly as it uses electricity and recycles steel scrap. However, shifting to EAF-based steel production requires the future supply of renewable electricity to be commercially available, as well as sufficient supply of high-quality steel scrap. In this process, the quality of steel output depends on the quality of scrap steel input. If the quality steel scrap is not available, then we can't produce good quality steel. The great example of 100% fossil fuel free steel is Sweden's hydrogen green steel, which is produced using the hybrid process.
The world's first fossil-free steel is on its way to production lines, thanks to Swedish green steel venture Hybrid. It replaces coking coal, traditionally needed for ore-based steelmaking, with fossil-free electricity and hydrogen. Hydrogen is a key part of the EU's plan to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050.
At last, one big misconception that I want to address is that people think that using electricity more and more in manufacturing will decarbonize the manufacturing industry. But that's not true. If the electricity we are going to use in manufacturing is being generated by burning fossil fuels, then it's not 100% clean. The growing electricity demand must be met using renewable energy sources. So here is the thing, we must be able to use clean energy to generate even more clean energy. For instance, if we use fossil fuel free steel to manufacture wind turbines and then generate electricity from it, that's what I mean by 100% clean energy. The entire supply and value chain must be decarbonized. This will initiate a healthy cycle of energy use. But if we are building more and more wind turbines and causing the increase in demand for steel, which is manufactured using fossil fuels, then we are making the problem of carbon emission worse. Similar things can be said about electric vehicles. Increasing adoption of EVs would mean increasing the demand for more electricity. And if that demand for more electricity is being met by burning more fossil fuels, then we are doomed. Electric vehicles, however, deserve their own entire video, which is currently in the pipeline. Dealing with the growing dependence on China. 20 years ago, China was at the bottom of the global solar industry. In 2003, China had a mere 2% share of the global solar manufacturing. Today, China's share is 80%. Of the top 10 solar companies in the world, 8 are Chinese. What did the Chinese government do differently that made them the dominant solar equipment manufacturer? For the most part, after the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels such as coal and oil significantly influenced global politics and power dynamics of the world. The need for more oil even led many countries to war. It won't be an overstatement if I say that having a tight hold over energy sources means having an indisputable influence over the global economy. That's why the Chinese government looks at solar industry as a strategic industry. The rising demand for solar energy would greatly benefit China in increasing its influence. Now, because China views it as a strategic industry, it is willing to spend enormous amounts of money for its development. Just as some other countries are willing to spend billions and billions on weapons and waging wars just to end up giving those weapons to terrorist organizations. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, the Chinese government provided solar manufacturers with numerous subsidies, including inland electricity, direct and indirect financial support, in addition to tax relief. A report in 2011 found that the Chinese solar companies incurred an average annual loss of 40% on net sales. The Chinese government funded these humongous corporate losses as a part of the strategy of capturing the global solar market. Free land, free electricity, free capital, and at times free labor supplied by the Chinese state has created Chinese solar manufacturing giants that we know today. Artificially cheap prices of Chinese solar components have killed the global solar manufacturing industry. In the United States, where solar cells were first invented in 1954, over 100 solar manufacturing companies have gone bankrupt over the last 2 decades. While China is doing all this, what are other countries doing? Just looking at corporations as some evil force, blaming them for all environmental disasters, and threatening manufacturers with carbon tax. I'm not arguing in favor or against the carbon tax, but the governments around the world must become good at risk-reward managements. Just threatening manufacturers won't help. Governments must make fossil fuel driven manufacturing risky, while at the same time make fossil fuel free manufacturing rewarding. We must reward companies who are going out of their way to manufacture things without fossil fuels. There must be an incentive for them. If that does not work out, then the governments are free to hit them with the carbon tax. To summarize this entire video, here are some closing thoughts. We started this video with a question. Can the world go 100% solar by the end of the 21st century? The answer to that question would be no, not that early. Not unless some revolutionary innovation takes place in the industry. First, we need to find the mass more alternatives for the diesel engines, increase the energy density of lithium-ion batteries, decarbonize the manufacturing industry, and be patient about the transition in energy sources. You often get misled by the media reports that show you the significant advancements in wind and solar energy. But here is the reality. In the year 1992, fossil fuels provided 86.6% of the world's primary energy. By 2017, they supplied 85.1%, a mere reduction of 1.5% in 25 years. That's the reality. Vaclav Smil, a Canadian economic analyst and one of my favorite writers who has authored several books on energy, puts it perfectly. Shifts in the energy system have historically been a slow process, particularly when coupled with long-term infrastructure. His observation is on point. We cannot replace the entire existing manufacturing and energy-producing infrastructure with a new one overnight without risking the collapse of the global economy. But on the brighter side, there are people in the world who are actually trying to find solutions for the problems we discussed today. They are doing the real work instead of just holding out rallies in support of Mother Earth. If you are interested in knowing the entire history of energy from our hunter-gatherer ancestors discovering fire 2 lakh years ago to modern day inventions, consider watching my video on the history of energy. And I think that's enough for today. See you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.